I think of the word resilience when I hear sustainability. So I think sort of a system or a network or community with the ability to sort of take care of itself into the future.
I think sustainability is about balancing inputs and outputs in an ecosystem.
I hate to be like yin and yang, but anything that like throws things out of balance in whichever direction that is in my mind not sustainable.
Having environmentalism be something that you think about in every movement and motion that you do, and seeing its intersections in different ways. So specifically with sustainability, looking at its overlap with health, with economics, with well-being, with how the environment is versus how an individual is, and all those kind of overlaps together.
I like to take a systems picture of it all, so trying to find ways of living where what we consume can be replenished by the systems that we have in place. So consuming in a way that is healthy for both people, our wallets, and the earth.
I guess, so I think that students here are definitely eager to talk about environmentalism and to talk about this larger sort of like activist role in the world that they'd like to have in terms of educating others about the importance of environmental sustainability. But I think when it comes down to sort of just our daily routine in life, it gets difficult.
I think a big thing that I see is one, disrespect for space. So by that I mean littering, both in buildings and outside, and that's both disrespect for the people that have to clean it up and for the land itself.
I mean we live in like a very consumerist society, so I think that people just have a lot of stuff in general.
The use of cars to get around campus.
Not reusing cups. So like I bring a mug with me everywhere, but I know a lot of people who drink coffee every day that don't.
Consuming energy without much awareness of where it comes from, and what the impacts of that will be. You know, like we walk into our houses every night and switch the lights on, and often my housemates will leave the lights on all night, you know, and not really taking the time to stop and think about the repercussions of that.
I also see a lot of improperly thrown away things.
We have a lot of like, you know, to-go coffee cups, like everything is really fast-paced here. Everything is compostable, but there's no compost.
And I think part of that's on the side of the sustainability office and groups that could be doing more to inform people that the cups in pie and everything in USAN and Summerfields are all compostable, which means they're not recyclable, they can't go in the recycling bins, they're compostable, which means they go in the trash.
There's like compostable cups, but there's like no clear place to put them, and they're all only compostable in industrial facilities. So I don't actually know where those were supposed to go.
I think a lot of the unsustainable practices on campus are can be counted in ways that is not changing the behavior of the students, and is more changing what we purchase on campus and what West Shop sells, what USAN serves, and how employees also handle recycling and composting.
I try not to purchase things I don't really need.
As someone who's always cold, I used to crank the heat up to like 72 or 74, and now I've realized that I should just bundle up even more and turn it down a couple degrees, and it won't make that much of a difference for me, but it will in terms of energy use.
I try to be really conscious of food waste as a topic.
But I make a point, like when I'm doing dishes, to only turn it on for like a second when I'm rinsing.
I'm a really big composter, but most recently I've been trying to get rid of a lot of clothing that I don't wear and donate it, and then pretty much try and buy mostly secondhand. A lot of people don't realize that it's a way to be sustainable, but a lot of like the problems in the consumer industry is like the making of new products.
I try to never use plastic or paper bags, like get them, I mean. So I'll put things in my backpack, or if I know I'm gonna go grocery shopping, I'll bring an extra tote bag with me to do that. I also carry a mug and a water bottle with me every day.
I think a big thing for me, like, comes back to trash and recycling, is about educating other people. Just because I pulled out that as a negative on campus, so I really, whenever I see one of my friends doing it, is approaching them in a more educational way than an attacking way, being like, why would you throw that in the trash? More like, okay, do you know where this is coming from? Do you know what it's made out of?
I also use the local food co-op. That's a good thing that many students do, I think, that I don't think a lot of people do that for sustainability reasons, but I think it is really good because it's a lot less fossil fuels going into transporting the food to students since it's more local.
I really try to embrace my vegan diet to its full potential, and that doesn't necessarily just mean not consuming animal products, but also trying to avoid products that are not fair trade or local or non-GMO or that are GMO, just to sort of, I don't know, embrace a form of eating that is sustainable and ethical as possible, and just being like very aware of my consumptive practices generally speaking.
Shipping takes up so much energy, so a lot of times people will order like multiple pairs of pants because they don't know which size will fit them, and then they return a bunch, and all of this is really bad for the environment and uses up a lot of energy that's not really necessary.
I have a lot of peers and friends here at Wesleyan that consider themselves to be environmental activists and care deeply about the environment, but I think that there is a lack of people deeply reflecting on how they eat and how that affects the planet.
There's also such an emphasis on recycling when it's really reduce and reuse come first. It's definitely a corporate interest to make us want to still buy things and put the burden of recycling and dealing with our waste on us.
You can create new habits, and it's just about changing that like prompt for yourself, or that trigger for when you are about to do a behavior, if you remember to try and be sustainable.
I think people don't think about energy very much, which is funny because that's like the main thing. I see students driving to very nearby locations all the time, and it baffles and frustrates me.
Real Food Challenge is a national organization. We have a Wesleyan chapter, and the goal of the organization is to shift university dollars from processed, industrialized food systems into food that's local, sustainable, humane, and fair trade. So we sort of measure how much, we call that real food, and there's these like nationally agreed upon sort of guidelines for what real food is, and we measure how much of the food in Usedan is real. Right now we're at 25%. That's gone up since from like 17% about 5 years ago.
Environmental justice, environmental racism are sort of these new buzzwords that we're starting to hear a lot more in the environmental community, which is good, but then often I'm sure lots of people don't necessarily know exactly what they mean. And essentially, as I stated a bit earlier, it basically has to do with the notion that environmental consequences disproportionately affect certain groups of people, and those people are most often people of color and sort of economically disenfranchised people. So I think that just understanding that whether it be through like the placement of where power plants are or the placement of landfills, they're often placed in poor minority communities. So just being aware of where our trash and where our pollution is going and who it's directly affecting. I think we often forget about that.
You know, if I spend a little more on this like organic produce, like it can kind of be pushed aside as like, oh, that's just bougie, or you just, you know, you just need that, like it seems like just like a little fancy thing you can have on the side to be nice to like your own body, but I think that it's like much more than that. If you're eating food that's like produced well and produced without chemicals, it reduces, you know, pesticide runoff. It like is really actually sustainable in a larger way. And I think people forget about that and think that food choices are like highly personal and only affect you and your body, and that's just like not how they are. It affects so many people and so many parts of the environment.
And like a carbon tax isn't gonna actually clean up the environment. Like, you're still polluting. Money doesn't change the physical impact. So I think it's really up to people to come up with ideas and create the change that is actually going to be genuinely sustainable, and to push for that on a policy level.
And I think food really struck a chord with me, because everyone has to eat food, and it's sort of this place where like you can connect like most intimately and immediately with the earth like 3 times a day, and that for some reason was just like seemed like really real and tangible, and meaningful to me.
A lot of people feel like nothing they will do will actually make a difference, and I think that's a really dangerous mentality that just keeps people obedient in this system. And I would urge people to think about where they're buying things from and to try buying more locally. You also support local economies and help your community members in that way. It's a great way to meet people as well, and to think about what they really need and versus what they can like reuse or fix or maybe go without having.
It's something that's been on my mind a lot recently, in terms of I do a lot of the little things that you're supposed to do. So like I'm the one in my house that explains to everyone how to recycle and like brought the composting bin over and makes everyone compost and yells at people when they like dump their food scraps in the trash can. And you know, to a certain extent, yes, that is like trying to be sustainable, but I don't think it's doing a very good job being sustainable because like I still have a car on campus.
If you start to change your behavior, your friends will start to change your behavior, and like even if it might not seem like a big deal to you bringing that reusable mug to Pi or buying clothes secondhand, like you'll start to impact other people's behavior and they'll start to impact other people's, and it's just like a cycle of good behavior that can come from that, even though you might feel like changing one small action isn't going to do anything.
It's kind of the thing of like if we all do a little, we'll only accomplish a little. And I think a lot of people feel like until the government chooses to actually do something, their actions aren't really going to have an impact. And I would urge people with this perspective to think about how the government doesn't really do things until enough people persuade them to.
I do also think that like the work that I do on this like on food justice and economic justice, so more like systems change, I'd say even though like it's not an action in the same way, I think it's doing more change, because I believe that like if we all did really well with like curbside recycling, that would not solve any sort of like climate crisis. Like it's definitely an issue that we have with like corporations and larger like, you know, like the industrial food system that we have in the US. Like if that doesn't change, and if we don't push the people who are in charge to like make huge structural changes, nothing's gonna, you know, we're all gonna die.
Because I really feel that it's fighting for everyone, for every living thing on this planet, no matter how, that sounds super cheesy, but for humans, plants, animals, it's everything. It's really about taking care of that space, and so often humans are prioritized, and it's really about having that balance for everyone.
And so I would argue that if you care about anyone else, like your friends or your loved ones, and you want them to have clean air and water and a healthy environment, that's why you should also care, because it is a tragedy of the commons, and thinking that these resources are not for everyone is really problematic, because they are.